Listen carefully and follow the sound to its source. Hey, Poser Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about the power of subdivision. What is subdivision? Well, subdivision is whenever you take a thing and you divide it into smaller parts. Subdivision usually refers to breaking things into two smaller parts, but you can do it into three smaller parts, just like the compound and simple meter. So normally when people say, oh, subdivide that in like music, they're talking about take the quarter notes, which as you can see here, we have some quarter notes. They'll say, oh, take these quarter notes and split them in half and go. So when you're saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and then like your instructor says, hey, subdivide that. And the reason people say that is because it gives you a much more accurate sense of time. It's a lot easier to tell where things are going to be, especially at slower tempos. But then you'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And so then you know like, oh, this is better. And then you could go down and even another level and be 1E into 2E into 3E into 4E into, but then you could subdivide down to things like triplets. So 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly, 4 lolly, triple it, triple it, triple it, triple it. And so you could do things like that. So subdividing is just breaking things apart. We're going to look at this from a compositional standpoint. We're also going to talk about things that are specific to MIDI, the stylistic ways of writing some of these things. So right now, I've got this sound. It's just a basic Harmor patch. If you don't know about Harmor, you can go check it out in my Harmor from the Ground Up tutorial series on my playlists. Now, I've set it up so that each note using the phase randomization knob is slightly different than the note before it. That way, it sounds more like a real instrument, because that's what real instruments do, right? They change every single time. So it's not a huge change. It's a subtle change because we're trying to play the same note. Now I'm going to add in a sense of meter, but just doing something like that, perhaps. Something like this. This part with synthesizers isn't always necessary. Oftentimes people rely, and I do it all the time, on drums to do this. But using this is just like an extra little like detail. It's like, oh, that just makes it a little more clear. Now we're going to subdivide. So we can take this rhythm and we can make it a lot more interesting by just doing something like this. Check it out. And now we've got this expectation. So we could put this over here and do that. Or we could take this away, right? And so we have this expectation, and then right here it's like, oh, it's kind of like a little refreshing. So we know, oh, do, like oh, this makes sense. This is some sort of a driving force. And with this, like, that's subdividing. You're just using subdividing to make it more interesting. We could even do this right here, and then so now we've got this do, and we've done it on an upbeat. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our next one, and this is going to naturally pull back into beat 1, right? Because that's where this beat wants to go. It wants to go back to beat 1. Once you've established the meter. Now, we've established it by the first measure. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this little subdivide thing and sort of crescendo, which means to get louder, and decrescendo means to get softer, into beat 1 of the beat. So if we play this. So now you have those really interesting options. Now, of course, you could break things into triplets. You could break things into all sorts of different other types of rhythm and get some really cool things jiving. But what we want to look at now is what about these, like, what about stuff like this, right? Where you go like this. This isn't really where it's like, oh, that's just a little bit shorter. But listen to the enormous impact such a small move can have. So that's way different. If we did that to the whole line and just shortened them all up. And now these last ones are super short, but check it out. And then this one could even get slightly longer. And this one could be maybe just... So that is pretty cool. Now, what would you call this? Now, this is where you get into things in music that they have different symbols for. One's like called staccato, and then depending on the instrument, there's actually different versions because there's different ways of accomplishing it. Like, for example, staccato means detached or spaced. It does not mean short. So whenever someone says play staccato, they mean play it, detached with a little bit of room between the notes, but not necessarily really, really short and accented, which is what a lot of young musicians tend to do. So... so that's staccato, but on a violin, they have a bow and they're able to do they're able to bounce the bow on top of the string, like boom, boom, boom. And so that sounds really different. Well, they have a different name for that. It's called spiccato. And so there's like these terms everywhere. In the land of MIDI, we have no terms. We just say, put some space between those notes, make it shorter. If they say make it staccato, you want to try and emulate that staccato feel. I believe staccatissimo is the one that one means short, I believe. I might be dead wrong there, though. I know that one thing, though, is most directors will scream, staccato does not mean short. So when you see staccato in music, they're like, freaking don't do that. Play it detached, which is, that's that whole, they're trying to nail this exact rhythmic feel that we're going for. You see, it can create quite a different feel. Now, let's go ahead and look at this, and we're like, oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and mess with the style in that way then. Now, the reason why they're called articulations at this point is because there's not really like a set subdivision. Like, what the heck? Where does that end? All right, so now we're going to dive into these articulations. So we have these things where the notes stop and where they end are obviously our two key points. Like, what defines the style of the note are those two things, and then what happens during the duration of the note. Now, we're not going to talk about the duration of the note yet. We're not going to talk about what's going on in the middle of the note, because you can do a number of huge things to imprint rhythm into that as well. But what we're going to look at are these articulations, and of course we've just discussed that you can these spaces. So let's go ahead and alter this. So we have, let's say that I want sort of a longer thing, and then I want a more interesting rhythm than that, maybe. So not more interesting, just different. I want a little more motion, because remember, maybe this is exactly what you need. There's some sort of huge drone. And then we'll lengthen that one out. And now I'm actually kind of happy with where the lengths are. Next thing we look at is, or you should be looking at the same time, I suppose, is the velocity. So we say, oh, I want this a little bit louder, that a little louder. Some people leave them all the same, and that can create a very different feel. Obviously, it's way more drone-like, and if you're relying on like drums or something, people can get the meter from that in the sense, but you make it a little more dynamic by altering these. Now, let's go ahead and add in some melody. So we haven't really talked about this. We're at the point now where we can, though. I'm relying on you having some knowledge of music theory. If you don't, my MIDI music theory course in my playlist section will take you through that whole mess. So let's go ahead and take this one down, just down. We'll keep it like that, right? And so now with our melody, we can get a better feel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that last little bit. I'm going to go down to A and down to a G. And so at this point, I'm like pretty much composing. And this needs to be a little bit longer, and this can be shorter. And so I'm going to do a little do-do-do, one of those things. And so we've taken our rhythm and we've now created a melody out of it. And this can be a little bit longer because it's hard. Oh, one thing to note, as notes get shorter, they will become less and less notes, and they will become more and more percussive hits. So you want to be careful with some of those things. Now we can add in a bend at the end of this note. So this is going to walk into the territory of what's happening during the note. So I've added a pitch bend note. If you don't have if you hit F11, there's a hold feature somewhere in here. General, click and hold special gestures. It's in there. But you could just click this and draw a note, and it will do the same thing. A little triangle up here. So I'm going to put a little bend right here at the bottom. So let's go bong. And so these can be very rhythmically important as well. And the duration of this bend lasts the length of this note until this note ends. So when this note ends, this bend never actually reaches the note B, because this note you don't hear. You only hear it when the note that's currently playing is on. So as this goes, it's go bong, and it's going to bend down, but it will never actually reach the B. So it'll be like left undone. But then we reach a C again, which is going to be fine. So interesting to go down. Now this one will basically slide straight to the G. This is basically legato. So this only works with native instruments native plugins to FL Studios. Native instruments to FL Studios, but not the company native instruments. That was confusing. So anyways, at this point, this is simulating sort of what legato will do. So but not quite the same deal. If we do it really fast, it basically will. And that's when, basically, if you're playing the clarinet, it's called tonguing. You put your tongue in between these bursts of air to articulate each note. So you go, do, 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 do. But then if they said, oh, slur this, or play it legato, you'll play a lot less intense. You'll still tongue, but it'll be like, do, 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 versus do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. So you're still chopping the note, but then slurred is like ooh. Well, in that case, slurring, this would be a tie. There'd be no difference. You don't put your tongue in there. So if you were to change notes, ooh versus do 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 versus do 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 do. So there's all these different options that you have available to yourself, and so for some reason they say they call it legato, which is like the same thing as not tonguing. It's not really legato. Like a clarinet player or a flute player, a classical musician will be confused by the fact that this is called legato, because they'd be like, that's slurring. This should just be called like slur mode or whatever. But for whatever reason, the standard practice is you call it legato. Like in every synth I've used thus far, it's had the word legato for that function. So it's really actually a slur. But anyways, this is what it sounds like. So you see that happened really fast. There was like no slur. So in that case, you could hear it. And so you go through and you see that it lasts only the length of this note. So this gives us some really interesting options for rhythm in that way as well. So by the way, this is also subdividing. We are subdividing this. Check it out. We put it right there. Subdivision, 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 versus if we had stuck with our original, first off, we couldn't even create this melody. If we look at what's happening on the beat, mostly C, C, C. We have 1D. Okay, so that'd be different. C, C, G. That'd be different. And then C. Let's even hear what that will sound like. So we'll get rid of this, and that's it. So you see, now if we add in all our extra little subdivisions, it's way more dynamic. A lot more is going on. There's motion. We can enhance which beats get what emphasis and all those kinds of things. So this was the Power of Subdivision. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.